What did you see specifically that made you say there was no elections in Rivers State?
I saw a lot of cases of intimidation. So, for example, when I was leaving my hotel on the morning of the election, the receptionist was like, "Why are you going out, sir?" I'm like, "I have to cover the elections." I said, "Elections? No, there is war." And really, the very first place I went to was the the Institute of Arts, which was a collation center in Obiakpo local government area. APC people had already come and scattered the place. Why? Because result sheets were missing. So they had scattered the place. Materials were not going to be distributed from there. It was clear that a lot of words in that place, in Obiakpo, would be affected by that. As a matter of fact, Rotimi Amaechi himself came there on that morning and then left. Nothing happened. And this affected the whole stretch. The entire Kwere Road, Ngobia Road were all affected. Now, going down to Ozuba Primary School, the APC guys had locked in the INEC officials. Again, they had the same complaints, no results sheets. Meantime, in the first place I went to, early in the morning there was already a shooting incident. They found the guy who was responsible. He was in a police uniform. They found he wasn't a policeman. The mob descended on him. The police, luckily for him, got there on time, freed him, found he wasn't a policeman, and they themselves descended on him. And then after a while, they took him away. Anyway, going forward, we went to Nigeria Info 92.3 FM, Port Harcourt. All the stories we're hearing were stories of mayhem. We got to Abunema. In Abunema, I saw a bottle being smashed on a woman's head. I grew up in Benin, so I've always felt that anything casual violence, I can cope with it. But this one was shocking. A woman. The youths had been going around telling people, "Don't come out to vote. Don't come out to vote." Yet this woman said she wanted to go and get accredited, so somebody smashed a beer bottle on her head for her troubles.
For trying to vote?
For trying to get accredited. We're not even talking of voting. When that happened, all of us around there called it a day. I'm talking of those of us that were observers, INEC people, we called it a day. We left. Only for less than 2 hours later, somebody who we had left behind in Abunema called us to say, "Man, they don't accredit finish, they don't vote finish." I mean, how did that happen?
So how does all of this happen? I mean, considering how all of the talk about, card readers and making things a little more proper and votes are still counted, how does this affect the final result and maybe litigation if that happens eventually?
Well, it's up to if there was something I tweeted, and I stand fully by that tweet, which was last week, that I believe the PDP would have won the election. I said that a few minutes ago. However, if the APC decides to go the legal routes to get the election cancelled, they have more than enough material to use, because that was how messed up those elections in Rivers were. Now, the violence was not as widespread as you as the impression that a lot of people got. However, this is important. The intimidation was very widespread, and in cases where people tried to exercise, like what I saw in Abunema, cases where people tried to exercise their rights despite the intimidation, then it degenerated to violence. So, for example, in Buguma, 7 vehicles burnt, a man decapitated. Those stories came from quite a number of places.
Well, something that actually stood out for me was the fact that before the elections, Rivers was always called a flashpoint, right from the start. For violence, for electoral malpractice, or whatever it was, everybody from INEC to security operatives kept saying, Rivers State, we have to watch it. Yeah. And things like this still happened. What does it say? What does this say about the elections in general?
Well, okay, I just want to make a quick point before I answer that. Rivers State has actually been a flashpoint because, in fact, the Rivers State judiciary, for instance, Cheta mentioned something about APC going to the courts. Now, let's even ask the courts in Rivers. Do you know the courts in Rivers have actually, they were up until 3 or 4 days ago, they were actually shut down for over a year. I had colleagues in Rivers that had, they were literally out of work for 1 year. And this was a whole state where you had the judiciary shut down. And then nobody was saying anything about it. So I come on Twitter and I make noise about it. And people are like, yeah, So I feel that Rivers aside the election, Rivers State, before it becomes something we cannot control, we actually have to pay a lot of attention to it. And then,
it's already beyond being something we can control.
I just didn't want to offend, So we have to really pay a lot of attention because I cannot understand why a whole judiciary will be shut down. In fact, there were barricades around the courts for a whole year. I didn't just understand it. And nobody was saying anything about it. It was just beyond comprehension for me. So basically, that translates to this, because when you have a situation whereby even the judiciary, it's probably not independent from the politics that happens in the states, then you have a problem already, because the people do not feel confident enough, to say no to certain things. So that's what I feel. So the problem with Rivers is actually root deep. Whatever it is, it has to be sorted before it turns into a cancer that will spread. And then regards the elections, of course, there were certain things that we expected. Electoral violence was expected. In fact, on that day of the elections, I had people calling, say, oh, Modupe, I know that you want to vote, so better I don't vote. Don't go. And people were calling me to tell me not to go out to vote, because everybody expected violence. But, luckily for us in Lagos, there was no violence. So let's say it was not as
for the most part.
Exactly, for the most part, in Lagos. So basically, it was beyond our expectation, the peace and all of that. So it was expected, but the scale at which it happened in Rivers was also, I feel that that's a symptom of the institutional breakdown that actually happens or has happened in Rivers State as a whole.
Before we're going to break out, do you think, is this something that can be tackled? So, we've heard so much about this aligning with the center. It became like a campaign thing between the presidential and governorship elections for governors to align with the center. It looks like the Rivers State, of course, isn't as it is now. Does Mr. President-elect now play a role? How much can he do to fix these things now in Rivers State and states that are like that?
Well, I think the whole aligning with the center phenomenon is rubbish. Basically, states have a right to go which party they want to go. And the president-elect, when he's sworn in, should be a president for all Nigerians, not a president for one party. So that's the one side. As regards Rivers specifically, there's a very heavy proliferation of arms in that state, and then there's extremely high unemployment. So you find a situation where a lot of youths are going to keep falling into these arms gangs who are equipped or armed when elections are coming around. So the possible solution will be, first, knock Rivers State off the main election cycle. Let them be having their elections on their own, so that we can have full concentration of force and INEC officials on the states on the day, one. And then two, they need to find jobs. They need to create a real economy in Rivers State. It's too heavily dependent on the oil sector, and the oil sector can only employ a few people. As long as they have this problem of where there are too many young people idle, they will always have this problem.
And I guess that's even a Nigeria-wide issue. But we're going to take a break now, because we're going to come back and talk about the inconclusives. We have Imo, Abia, Taraba in particular to talk about. So please stay with us.